Less than 5%. That's it. Out of more than 10,000 bills introduced in a single session of Congress, fewer than 500 actually become law. Think about that. Thousands of ideas, and most of them die before they ever get a chance. And here's what's worse. A 2014 study from Princeton University by researchers Martin Gilens and Benjamin Page looked at 1,779 policy issues over 2 decades and found something shocking. The preferences of the average citizen had almost zero impact on which policies actually became law. Let that sink in. So if the average person has almost no say, then who is making the laws? And more importantly, how are laws actually made? That's exactly what we're going to break down today, step by step, from the very first idea all the way to the signature that makes it official. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you will understand the system better than most people who live under it. Stay with me. Let's go back, way back. Before parliaments, before Congress, before courtrooms, humans have been making laws for over 4,000 years. The oldest known surviving law code is the Code of Ur-Nammu, written around 2100 BCE in ancient Sumer. That's modern-day Iraq. And it didn't come from a vote. It came from a king who said, "I eliminated enmity, violence, and cries for justice." Then came the more famous Code of Hammurabi, around 1754 BCE, with 282 laws carved into a giant stone pillar. These laws covered everything from what a sailor should earn per year to what happens if a doctor accidentally kills a patient during surgery, to how much a man owes if he breaks someone's bone. These weren't suggestions. These were rules, with real consequences. Now here's what's interesting. The basic idea behind those ancient laws is the same idea we use today. Laws exist to keep order, protect the weak, and punish those who cause harm. The methods have changed, but the purpose? It's been the same for thousands of years. And understanding that history is the first step to understanding how laws work today. Here's something most people don't know. There isn't just one way to make laws in the world. There are actually 2 major systems that almost every country on Earth follows. Around 40 countries use common law, and the rest mostly use what's called civil law. And the difference between them? It's huge. Common law started in England after the year 1066. It spread to the United States, Canada, Australia, India, Nigeria, and many other former British colonies. In this system, judges look at past court decisions to make new decisions. So if a judge in 1985 ruled that a landlord can't kick out a tenant without 30 days' notice, a judge today can point to that old case and say, "We already decided this. The same rule applies." That's called precedent, and it's the backbone of common law. Civil law is different. It started in ancient Rome, and today it's used in countries like France, Germany, Japan, Brazil, and most of South America and Europe. In civil law, judges don't look at old cases. Instead, they look at a big written book of rules called a code. The judge's job is to read the code and apply it to the facts. Simple as that. Now, which system is better? That's a debate we'll save for another day. But knowing the difference, that's key. But wait, there's a third system that many people forget about: religious law. In countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran, many laws come directly from religious texts. Sharia law, which comes from the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, governs everything from business contracts to family disputes. And it's one of the 3 most common legal systems on the planet. Now, some countries mix these systems together. Nigeria, for example, uses common law in the southern states for things like business and criminal cases, but uses religious law in the northern states for matters like marriage and inheritance. This kind of blending is more common than you think. Many countries around the world operate under what scholars call a mixed or hybrid legal system. So already, you can see that laws are not made the same way everywhere. The country you live in, the history of that country, and even the religion of that country. All of these shape how laws are created and enforced. But today, we're going to focus mainly on the system that most of the world's largest democracies use. And that starts with one simple thing: an idea. Let's talk about that next. Every single law, every rule that governs your daily life started as nothing more than an idea. That's it. Someone notices that their neighborhood has no speed limit on a dangerous road where kids play. Or a business owner realizes there's no rule stopping companies from dumping chemicals into the local river. Or a parent finds out their child's school doesn't have to report food safety violations. And they think, there should be a law about this. That idea can come from anywhere. According to the U.S. House of Representatives, a law can begin with an ordinary citizen, a sitting member of Congress, a petition from a community group, or even a campaign promise made during an election. The origin doesn't matter as much as what happens next, because an idea is just an idea. It has no power, no teeth, no authority. For that idea to become a law that everyone must follow, it has to go through a long, difficult process that kills most ideas before they ever see the light of day. And that process is what we're going to walk through right now, step by step. Pay close attention, because this is where it gets real. Step 1. The idea gets written down in formal legal language. This written document is called a bill. A bill is not a law yet. It's a proposal. It's a written suggestion that says, hey, I think we should make this a rule. According to Congress.gov, there are 4 types of proposals: bills, joint resolutions, concurrent resolutions, and simple resolutions. But the most common form is the bill. Now, who writes the bill? Usually, it's a team effort. A member of Congress might work with their staff lawyers, policy experts who have spent years studying a specific topic like healthcare or education, and even outside interest groups who have been pushing for the change. The writing has to be precise. Every single word matters, because later on, courts will read those words and decide what they mean. Here's the thing most people don't realize. During the 109th Congress alone, over 10,558 bills and 143 joint resolutions were introduced. That's a lot of writing, a lot of ideas, and most of them will go absolutely nowhere. But the ones that do survive? Those are the ones that change your life. Let's see what happens next. Only a member of Congress can officially introduce a bill. In the United States, that means one of the 435 members of the House of Representatives or one of the 100 senators. Nobody else. Not the president, not a judge, not a celebrity, not a billionaire. Only an elected member of Congress can drop that bill into the system. The member who introduces the bill is called the sponsor, and they can invite other members to support it too. Those supporters are called co-sponsors. The more co-sponsors a bill has, the more seriously people take it. It shows that the idea has support, that other lawmakers believe in it enough to put their name on it. But here's where it gets interesting. According to House rules, the House can only introduce bills about taxes and revenue. And the Senate? It handles presidential nominations and treaties. So even though both chambers are equal in making laws, they each have special areas where only they can start the process. Remember this. It becomes important later. All right, the bill has been introduced. Now what? Does the whole Congress sit down and read it? Nope. The bill gets sent to a committee. And this is where most bills go to die. According to Congress.gov, perhaps the most important phase of the entire legislative process is what happens inside the committees. Think of committees as small groups of experts. Currently, there are 20 standing committees in the House and 16 in the Senate. Each committee focuses on a specific topic. So, a bill about military spending goes to the Armed Services Committee. A bill about student loans goes to the Education Committee. A bill about building new highways goes to the Transportation Committee. This way, the people reviewing the bill actually know something about the subject. Inside the committee, members research the bill, discuss it, hold hearings where outside experts and regular citizens can come testify, and then vote on whether to send it forward or let it die. The vast majority of bills never make it out of committee. They just sit there, forgotten. And that's by design. The system is built to be hard, on purpose. And later, I'll tell you exactly why. Keep watching. Committee hearings. This is where the public gets to speak. During hearings, witnesses come before the committee and give testimony. These witnesses can be scientists explaining why a new environmental regulation is needed, doctors arguing for better healthcare funding, small business owners worried about new tax rules, or even everyday citizens sharing their personal stories about how a law would affect their family. The committee members ask questions, sometimes tough questions, sometimes political questions designed to make the other side look bad. But the point is, this is where information enters the process. This is where facts, data, emotions, and real-world experiences get placed on the record. And those records, they become part of something called the legislative history. Why does that matter? Because later, if a court needs to figure out what a law means, judges can go back and read these hearing transcripts to understand what Congress intended. Legal scholars consider committee reports the most important source for understanding legislative intent. So those hearings aren't just political theater. They're actually critical to how the law gets interpreted for years to come. After hearings, the committee does something called markup. This is where they actually change the bill, add words, remove words, rewrite entire sections. This markup process is where the bill can transform from what one person imagined into something completely different. Sometimes a lawmaker will sneak in extra spending for their home district during markup. Maybe a bridge project nobody asked for, or funding for a local military base to keep it open. This kind of hidden addition is called pork, and the tactic is called pork barreling. It's been happening for decades. Some people call it corruption. Others call it smart politics. Either way, it happens during markup. Once markup is done, the committee takes a vote. If a majority of committee members say yes, the bill moves forward. It gets what's called reported out of committee. But if they say no, the bill is dead. Right there. No funeral, no ceremony, just dead. And remember, most bills die at this stage. So the ones that survive? They've already beaten tough odds. The bill made it out of committee. That alone is a victory. But now comes the next challenge, the full chamber. The bill goes to the floor of the House or the Senate, where all members can see it, debate it, and vote on it. According to House.gov, a simple majority of 218 out of 435 is needed to pass a bill in the House. But the House and Senate handle floor debate very differently. The House tends to move fast. Rules limit how long members can talk and which amendments they can offer. The majority party has a lot of control. But the Senate? The Senate is a whole different story. The Senate loves to talk, and talk, and talk. In the Senate, rules give individual senators a lot of power. A single senator can hold up legislation just by refusing to stop talking. That's called a filibuster. And to stop a filibuster, you need 60 out of 100 senators to agree. That's a high bar. And it's one of the biggest reasons why popular bills often fail in the Senate even after passing the House. More on that in a moment. Let's talk about the filibuster, because it's one of the most powerful and controversial tools in all of lawmaking. A 2025 study from Yale's Institution for Social and Policy Studies found that the Senate passed only 54% of popular bills. That means nearly half of the bills that most Americans wanted died in the Senate. Why? The filibuster. Researcher Shiro Kuriwaki explained that the founders were worried about temporary majorities ramming through decisions. So the Senate developed rules that let only bipartisan and overwhelmingly popular bills pass easily. Everything else gets stuck. So you have a situation where the House passes 87% of bills the public supports, but the Senate blocks almost half of them. Nearly half of the issues studied by Kuriwaki and his colleague Stephen Ansolabi here failed due to inaction. Not a no vote, just nothing. The bill sits there and nobody votes. And this is especially true under divided government, when different parties control different parts of the system. Frustrating? Absolutely. But that's the system. Now, during floor debate, members can propose amendments. These are changes to the bill. And amendments can do anything. They can add a whole new section that provides funding for school lunch programs, remove a line that would have raised taxes on small businesses, or completely rewrite the penalties for breaking the law being discussed. Sometimes amendments are offered in good faith. A lawmaker genuinely wants to improve the bill. But other times, amendments are used as weapons. A lawmaker who hates the bill might attach a poison pill amendment. That's an amendment so unpopular or so extreme that it makes the whole bill toxic. Nobody wants to vote for it anymore. Clever and kind of evil. This is the political chess match that happens behind the scenes. Every amendment is strategic. Every word is calculated. And the final version of the bill that gets voted on might look nothing like the original version that was introduced months ago. The bill that goes in is not always the bill that comes out. Keep that in mind. Let's say the bill passes the House. Great! Celebration time, right? Not so fast. Because passing one chamber is only half the battle. The bill now has to go to the other chamber and survive the entire process all over again. According to the legislative process, both the House and the Senate must separately agree to the exact same bill before it can become law. So the bill goes to the Senate, gets assigned to another committee, goes through more hearings, more debate, more amendments. And the Senate might change things. They might add provisions the House didn't want, or remove things the House fought hard to include. And here's the catch. If the Senate version is different from the House version, the bill can't go to the president yet. The two versions have to be made identical first. And that leads us to one of the most important and least understood parts of the entire process, the conference committee. This is where the real negotiating happens, and most people have no idea it even exists. The conference committee. According to ushistory.org, a conference committee is formed when the House and Senate pass different versions of the same bill. Members from both chambers sit down together and try to work out a compromise. They negotiate, they argue, they trade favors. This is where a senator might say, "I'll agree to your version of the environmental rules if you agree to add my provision for farm subsidies." Or a House member might say, "We'll drop our demand for higher penalties if you keep our education funding section." It's a give and take, and it can take days or even weeks. Once the conference committee agrees on a final version, that version goes back to both the House and Senate for one more vote. Both chambers must pass the identical bill. If either chamber says no, the whole thing falls apart. The bill could die right here at the finish line, after months of work. After hearings and debates and amendments, all for nothing. That's the reality of lawmaking. The bill survived both chambers. Both the House and Senate voted yes on the same version. Now it goes to the most powerful desk in the country, the president's desk. According to USA.gov, the president has 10 days to make a decision, sign it or veto it. If the president signs the bill, it becomes law, done, official, enforceable. Everyone in the country must now follow it. The government publishing office prints the new law through a process called enrolling. And just like that, what started as an idea in someone's mind is now the rule of the land. But what if the president says no? What if the president uses the veto? Well, the story isn't over yet. Congress has one more move, and it's a powerful one. But it's also extremely hard to pull off. We'll get to that in the next section. Don't go anywhere. The veto. One of the most powerful tools the president has. When the president vetoes a bill, they're saying, I refuse to make this a law. And in most cases, that's the end of it. The bill is dead. According to Congress.gov, the president's veto power can actually shape what goes into bills in the first place, because Congress knows they have to write laws the president will accept. But there's a catch. Congress can override a veto. According to USA.gov, the bill can override the bill is the veto. According to USA.gov, the president veto power and the president will accept. But Congress, if 2/3 of both the House and Senate vote to override, the bill becomes law without the president's signature. That's 290 votes in the House and 67 in the Senate. An incredibly high bar. It almost never happens. And there's one more trick: the pocket veto. If the president doesn't sign a bill and Congress goes out of session within those 10 days, the bill is automatically vetoed. No signature, no override, just gone. This pocket veto cannot be overridden. It's the president's secret weapon, and many people have never even heard of it. You might be thinking, why is this so complicated? Why does it take so long? And that's a great question. The answer goes back to the very beginning of America. According to ushistory.org, the founders intentionally made the process difficult. They believed that efficiency was the hallmark of oppressive government. Think about it. If one person or a small group could make laws quickly, like a king issuing a decree from his throne or a dictator signing an order over breakfast, there would be no checks, no balance, no protection for the people. So the founders built in obstacles, speed bumps, checkpoints. Every step is designed to slow things down. Is the system perfect? Absolutely not. Many critics say it's too slow for a fast-paced country, and there's a real argument to be made there. But the idea behind it is this: any law that survives this brutal process has been examined by many eyes, debated from many angles, tested by many challenges, and that, the founders believed, would protect the people from bad laws. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room: money. Because the official process is only half the story. Behind the scenes, there's another force that shapes which laws get made and which don't. And that force is cold, hard cash. The Gillens and Page study from Princeton found that economic elites and organized business groups have substantial independent impacts on U.S. government policy, while average citizens? Little or no independent influence. They studied 1,779 policy issues over 20 years. The data was clear. According to Represent.us, the 200 most politically active companies in the U.S. spent $5.8 billion on lobbying and campaign contributions in just 5 years. And what did they get in return? $4.4 trillion in taxpayer support. That's a return of 750 times their investment. 750 times. So when you wonder why certain laws pass and others don't, follow the money. It almost always leads to the answer: lobbying. It's legal, it's massive, and it happens every single day in Washington. Lobbyists are people hired by companies, industry groups, or organizations to meet with lawmakers, provide research, draft suggested bill language, and persuade them to vote a certain way. Some lobbyists push for things like cleaner air. Others push to block regulations on their industry. Now, lobbying isn't automatically evil. The concept makes sense. Lawmakers can't be experts on everything, so experts from different industries help them understand the issues. That's the theory. But in practice? When billions of dollars are flowing from corporations to the same lawmakers who write the bills, the line between helping and buying gets very blurry. And this is exactly what the Gillens and Page study proved. When the wealthy wanted a policy, it had about a 45% chance of becoming law. When average citizens wanted a policy, the probability barely changed regardless of how many people supported it. The researchers put it carefully. They called it economic elite domination. But you and I, we can just call it what it is: But all is not lost. The Yale study also found something hopeful. 80% of laws that actually did pass were supported by the majority of Americans. So the legislative process does filter out unpopular proposals. The system isn't completely broken. The problem is more specific. When the public wants something and the wealthy want something different, the wealthy usually win. But when both groups agree, laws get passed. And when an issue is popular and bipartisan, it moves even faster. The key is alignment. When the people and the powerful are on the same page, the system works. So what can you do? Well, understanding the process is step one, and you're doing that right now. Step two is knowing where to apply pressure, and I'll share that with you before this video ends. But first, we need to cover something crucial that most educational videos skip entirely: how laws work at the state level, because that's where most of the laws that affect your daily life actually come from. Here's a fact that might surprise you. The federal government in Washington makes the big headlines, but the laws that affect your daily life the most, those are made at the state level. Your state decides things like the speed limit on the road outside your house, whether you need a license to cut someone's hair, how much sales tax you pay when you buy groceries, and what your kids learn in school. Each of the 50 states has its own legislature, its own governor, and its own process for making laws. And that process looks a lot like the federal process. Bills are introduced, sent to committees, debated, amended, passed by both chambers, and signed by the governor. Same basic steps, different scale. But here's what's interesting. Because states are smaller, the process tends to be faster. And because state legislators represent fewer people, they're often more accessible. You can actually walk into your state representative's office, sit down across from them, and say, "I have an idea for a law." Try doing that with a U.S. senator. Good luck. So if you want to change the law, sometimes starting local is the smartest move. And it goes even deeper than the state. Cities and counties have their own laws too. These are called ordinances. Your city council decides things like whether a new apartment building can be built on your street, what time bars have to close at night, and whether you're allowed to park on a certain side of the road during winter. The process for making local laws is usually simpler. A city council member proposes something, there's a public hearing where residents can speak for or against it, the council discusses it, and then they vote. No committees, no conferences, just debate and a vote. Much more direct. And this is where individual citizens have the most power. At a city council meeting, your voice can literally change a law. Remember that Princeton study? The one that said average citizens have almost no influence on federal policy? Well, at the local level, the opposite is often true. Show up to those meetings, speak, make your voice heard. That's where your power is strongest. Now let's zoom out, way out, because laws aren't just a national thing. There are international laws too. And the way they're made is completely different from anything we've discussed so far. International laws come from treaties. 2 or more countries sit down, negotiate terms, and sign an agreement. For example, countries agree not to use certain weapons in war, to protect the environment by reducing carbon emissions, or to respect each other's borders. These agreements become binding under international law. But here's the catch. There's no international police force. Enforcement depends on countries choosing to follow the rules. Organizations like the United Nations, the International Criminal Court, and the World Trade Organization help create and enforce these laws. But their power is limited. A powerful country can sometimes ignore international law with few consequences. This is one of the biggest weaknesses in the global legal system, but it's also a reality that shapes how nations interact with each other every day. Above all of these laws, federal, state, local, even international, there is one thing that stands above everything else: the Constitution. In the United States, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Every other law must follow it. If a law breaks the Constitution, that law is ignored. Article 1, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution says, "All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States." This is where Congress gets its authority to make laws. Without this line, Congress has no power. It's all built on this foundation. And when there's a question about whether a law is constitutional or not, that question goes to the courts, specifically to the Supreme Court, 9 justices, and their decision is final. They can strike down any law passed by Congress if they believe it violates the Constitution. That's called judicial review, and it's one of the most powerful checks in the entire system. So Congress makes the laws, the president signs the laws, but who decides what the laws actually mean? The courts. Because no matter how carefully a law is written, words can be interpreted in different ways. Imagine a law says vehicles are not allowed in the park. Simple enough, right? But does that include a bicycle? What about a wheelchair? A child's toy car? What about an ambulance responding to an emergency? Someone has to decide, and that someone is a judge. This is why legislative history matters so much. When judges need to figure out what Congress meant by a certain word or phrase, they go back and read the committee reports, hearing transcripts, and floor debates. They're trying to understand the intent behind the law. And different judges interpret things differently, which is why the same law can sometimes mean different things in different courts. Confusing? Yes, but that's reality. Here's something really important that most people miss. After Congress passes a law, that law is usually broad. It sets the general direction, but the details? Those get filled in by something called regulations. And regulations are written not by Congress, but by government agencies. Let's say Congress passes a law that says the air must be clean. Great, but what does clean mean? How much pollution is allowed? How do you measure it? Who checks? What's the penalty for breaking the rules? All of those details get written by an agency like the Environmental Protection Agency. They create specific regulations that carry the force of law. This means that unelected officials are essentially writing detailed rules that affect your life. And there are thousands of new regulations created every year, far more than the number of actual laws Congress passes. So when people say there are too many rules, they're usually talking about regulations, not laws. And understanding this difference is crucial to understanding how the system actually works. But wait, there's another way rules get made, one that bypasses Congress entirely: executive orders. The president can issue these on their own. No vote needed, no committee hearings, no debate. The president signs a piece of paper, and it becomes a directive that the entire executive branch must follow. Now, executive orders are not laws. They can only direct how existing laws are carried out. A president can't create a new tax with an executive order, but they can change how immigration rules are enforced, or reorganize a government department, or declare a national emergency. The line between what an executive order can and can't do is often blurry. And here's the thing. The next president can undo the previous president's executive orders with the stroke of a pen. So executive orders are powerful, but temporary. They don't have the staying power of actual legislation, which is why presidents often push Congress to pass actual laws instead, because laws are much, much harder to undo. Now here's something that gives power directly to the people. In many states, citizens can create their own laws through something called a ballot initiative or referendum. This is direct democracy in action. Here's how it works in most states. A group of citizens writes a proposed law, collects a certain number of signatures from registered voters, sometimes tens of thousands, and then the proposal goes on the ballot during the next election. Every voter gets to vote yes or no on it directly. If it passes, it becomes law. No legislators involved, no committees, no governor's signature needed in some cases. This is how many major laws have been passed in the United States. Things like legalizing marijuana in Colorado, raising the minimum wage in Florida, and changing campaign finance rules in various states all happened through ballot initiatives. The people voted directly, and the result became law. This is one of the most powerful tools citizens have, and most people don't even know it exists. So, after everything we've covered, who really controls the laws? Is it Congress? The president? The courts? The people? The answer is all of them, and none of them fully. The system is designed so that no single group has total control. The Yale study found that Congress reflects public opinion about 55% of the time, meaning 45% of the time, it doesn't. That's not great, but it's also not zero. The system is imperfect, but not completely broken. The truth is, laws are made through a messy combination of ideas, politics, money, public pressure, and timing. Good ideas fail because of bad timing. Bad ideas pass because of powerful backers. And sometimes, just sometimes, the system works exactly as it should. A real problem gets identified. Smart people draft a solution. The public supports it. Congress passes it. The president signs it, and life gets a little bit better for everyone. That's the ideal, and it does happen, just not as often as it should. Now, there's a special category of law that works differently from everything else: foreign policy laws. The Yale study found that foreign policy issues had the lowest alignment with public opinion, just 30% of the time. That means 70% of the time, foreign policy laws don't match what the public wants. Why? Because foreign policy is complicated. Decisions about things like sending troops overseas, imposing economic sanctions on a hostile country, or negotiating arms deals involve classified intelligence, diplomatic relationships, and national security concerns that the average citizen simply doesn't have access to. Lawmakers argue they need flexibility to act without being bound by public opinion polls. But critics say this creates a dangerous disconnect. When the government can make decisions about war and peace without reflecting the will of the people, that's a serious gap in democracy, and it's one of the ongoing debates in political science. How much should foreign policy reflect what the public wants? There's no easy answer, but it's a question worth thinking about. On the other end of the spectrum, the study found that economic issues had the highest alignment between Congress and public opinion, 61% of the time. This includes things like setting tax rates, deciding how much the government should spend on roads and bridges, and creating rules for how banks can lend money. Why are economic laws more likely to match what people want? Probably because everyone feels the economy. When gas prices go up, everyone notices. When unemployment rises, everyone worries. Economic issues are personal in a way that foreign policy often isn't. So lawmakers know they'll face consequences if they ignore the public on economic matters. This is actually useful to know. If you want to influence law, focus on economic issues. That's where public opinion has the most weight. That's where your voice is most likely to be heard. And that's where your vote has the biggest impact. Remember that the next time you go to the ballot box. Have you ever wondered why Congress seems to get nothing done sometimes? There's a reason: divided government. This is when different political parties control the House, the Senate, and the White House. And when that happens, everything slows to a crawl. Data from GovTrack shows that Congress typically enacts 4 to 6 million words of new law in each 2-year session. But when government is divided, that number can drop significantly. Bills pass the House and die in the Senate, or they pass Congress and get vetoed by the president. The gears of government just grind. The 118th Congress set a historic low. According to analysis by the software firm Quorum, just 0.37% of bills introduced became law through the end of April. That's the lowest percentage going back to at least the 101st Congress in 1990. Out of 12,354 bills introduced, only 46 became law. 46. That's not efficiency, that's paralysis. Here's the dirty secret of lawmaking. Most bills don't get a dramatic death. They don't fail in some big televised vote. They just disappear quietly, without a trace. According to GovTrack's analysis, only about 3% of bills get enacted. Another 1% are companion bills identical to those that pass, and almost everything else just dies in committee, never debated, never voted on, never even read by most lawmakers. Think about that. A lawmaker spends weeks drafting a bill about protecting veterans' health care. They introduce it with a speech. They hold a press conference. Their local newspaper writes about it. And then, nothing. The bill gets sent to a committee where it sits in a pile with hundreds of other bills. And 2 years later, when that session of Congress ends, it's automatically dropped. Gone, like it never existed. If the lawmaker still cares about the idea, they have to start the whole process over again in the next session. New bill number, new introduction, new committee assignment. It's like starting from zero. And that's why patience and persistence are the most important qualities in lawmaking. Not brilliance, not charisma, persistence. Now here's something funny and a little sad. When Congress does manage to pass laws, a lot of them are not exactly earth-shattering. According to HuffPost, out of the last dozen bills Congress passed in one recent stretch, 7 were to rename post offices or veterans facilities. That's right, renaming buildings. Not fixing healthcare, not addressing climate change, not reforming the criminal justice system, just renaming buildings. As one congressman joked, those post offices will not name themselves. Now, renaming things isn't pointless. Honoring local heroes matters, but it does highlight a truth about modern Congress. The easy stuff gets done. The hard stuff gets stuck. And when people complain that Congress isn't doing enough, this is what they mean. The big, complicated, important legislation keeps getting blocked, while the small, non-controversial bills sail through. It's the ultimate example of picking the low-hanging fruit while the tree is on fire. Here's a fascinating trend. Even though the number of bills passed has gone down over the decades, the size of those bills has gone way up. GovTrack data shows that Congress has typically enacted 4 to 6 million words of new law in each 2-year session since World War II. But those words are packed into fewer and larger bills. What does that mean? It means instead of passing 600 separate small bills about 600 separate topics, Congress now passes 200 massive bills that each cover dozens of topics. These are called omnibus bills. They combine spending, policy changes, regulations, and sometimes completely unrelated items, all into one giant package. This matters because it means lawmakers are often voting yes or no on huge bills they haven't fully read. A single omnibus bill can be thousands of pages long, and buried in those pages might be provisions that most voters would hate if they knew about them. But because they're bundled with things people want, the whole package passes. This is one of the sneakiest aspects of modern lawmaking. Timing. It's everything in lawmaking. GovTrack analysis shows that about half of all legislation that will be enacted in a congressional session is enacted in the final quarter. That means lawmakers wait until the last possible moment to pass most of their laws. Why? Because deadlines create pressure. When a session is about to end, and lawmakers know any unfinished bills will die, they finally start making deals. Compromises happen. Old grudges get set aside. And laws that have been stuck for months suddenly fly through in days. This is important to know because if you're tracking a bill you care about, don't lose hope if it seems stuck for months. Many bills that look dead in June are very much alive in December. The end of a congressional session is like the last 5 minutes of a basketball game. That's when the real action happens. And knowing this gives you a strategic advantage in understanding when to push hardest for the changes you want. So you've learned how laws are made, but how can you actually track a specific bill through the process? Good news, it's easier than ever. Websites like congress.gov and govtrack.us let you search for any bill by number, topic, or keyword. You can see who sponsored the bill, which committee it's in, what amendments have been proposed, and whether it's been voted on. You can even set up alerts so you get notified when something happens to a bill you care about. This is free, open to everyone, no special access required. Here's a practical tip. If there's a bill you care about, maybe something about student loan reform, or a new environmental rule, or changes to immigration policy, find the bill number, track it. Then call your representative's office and tell them you're watching. Lawmakers pay attention when constituents are informed, because informed voters are the ones who show up on Election Day. And that is the one language every politician speaks. Now let me be real with you. I know it's easy to feel powerless after hearing about the filibuster, lobbying, and the influence of money. I get it. But here's what I need you to understand. Citizens still have real power. You just have to know where to use it. The most direct power you have is your vote. Every 2 years, all 435 House seats are up for election. Every 6 years, your senators face the voters. And at the state and local level, elections happen even more frequently. These are the people who make the laws, and you decide who they are. But your power goes beyond voting. You can attend public hearings. You can write letters to your representatives. You can join advocacy groups. You can organize petitions. You can run for office yourself. People have started movements from their living room that ended up changing state law, like the parents who organized a campaign for stricter school bus safety laws after their child was injured, or the community group that petitioned for better water quality testing after getting sick from contaminated drinking water. These things happen. They start with one person who says, "Enough. I'm going to do something about this." Now, everything we've discussed so far has been focused on Western legal systems, but there's a whole other tradition of law that deserves attention: Eastern legal philosophy, and it offers some powerful insights that the Western world often overlooks. In ancient China, the Confucian tradition emphasized moral leadership over strict laws. The idea was that if rulers were virtuous, the people would follow willingly without needing harsh punishments. Confucius believed that shame and moral education were more powerful tools than prison cells. This philosophy shaped Chinese law for thousands of years. In India, the concept of dharma guided lawmaking for centuries. Dharma means duty, righteousness, and the natural order of things. Ancient Indian texts like the Laws of Manu laid out detailed rules for social behavior, property rights, and criminal justice, all rooted in the idea that law should reflect the natural moral order of the universe. These traditions still influence legal thinking in Asia today, and they remind us that there's more than one way to think about justice. Here's a truth that applies everywhere in the world. Laws reflect the values of the society that makes them. What's legal in one country might be illegal in another. What's considered a fundamental right in one culture might be restricted in another. Laws are not universal truths. They're cultural choices. This is why alcohol is legal in France but banned in Saudi Arabia. It's why some countries have the death penalty while others have completely abolished it. It's why gun ownership is protected in the United States but heavily restricted in Japan. Each country's laws tell you what that society values most, and this means that laws can change when values change. The things that were once legal, like slavery, child labor, and denying women the right to vote, became illegal when societies decided those things were wrong. Laws evolve, slowly, painfully sometimes, but they do evolve. And understanding that laws are choices, not permanent truths, is one of the most empowering realizations you can have. History is full of examples of ordinary people who changed the law, not through money, not through power, but through sheer determination. Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. That single act of defiance helped spark a movement that eventually led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Erin Brockovich was a legal clerk with no formal education in law who investigated contaminated water in a California town. Her work led to one of the largest environmental lawsuits in American history and changed how companies are held responsible for pollution. Malala Yousafzai was a teenager in Pakistan who stood up for girls' education. She was shot for it. She survived, and her advocacy helped change education policies in multiple countries. These people didn't wait for permission. They didn't have lobbyists. They didn't have billions of dollars. They had conviction. And they proved that one person, one determined person, can move the machinery of law in ways that billions of dollars sometimes cannot. Never underestimate what you can do. Before you try to change any law, you need to know the laws that already exist. And specifically, you need to know your rights, because the most dangerous citizen is an uninformed citizen. If you don't know your rights, like the right to remain silent when police question you, the right to a fair trial, or the right to peacefully protest, then those rights might as well not exist. Every country has a foundational document that spells out basic rights. In the United States, it's the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. These protect your freedom of speech, your right to bear arms, your protection against unreasonable searches, your right to a fair trial, and more. Read them, study them, memorize the ones that matter most to you. Because here's the reality. The people who know their rights are the ones who can defend them. And the people who know the law are the ones who can change it. Knowledge isn't just power in this case. Knowledge is protection. All right, let's get practical. You have an idea for a new law. What do you actually do? Here are the concrete steps. Step 1. Research. Make sure a similar law doesn't already exist. Use congress.gov or your state's legislative website to search. Step 2. Write a clear, specific description of what you want the law to do. Not vague wishes, specific changes. Step 3. Contact your elected representative. Call their office, email them, visit in person. Bring your idea, bring research, bring data, bring stories from real people who would benefit. Step 4. Build support. Get other people to contact the same representative about the same issue. Numbers matter. Step 5. Be patient. This process takes months or even years. Don't give up after one phone call. Follow up. Keep pushing. Step 6. If your representative won't listen, consider supporting a different candidate who will. Or, run for office yourself. Someone has to be in that seat. Why not you? Petitions. They're one of the oldest forms of democratic action, and they're protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution. The right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That's literally in the document. In the digital age, petitions have become even more powerful. Websites allow you to create an online petition, share it on social media, and collect thousands of signatures in days. When a petition gets enough attention, news outlets cover it. And when news outlets cover it, politicians notice. It's a chain reaction. Now, a petition alone won't change a law. It's not binding. Nobody has to listen. But what it does is demonstrate public support. It creates a record that says, this many people care about this issue. And when combined with other forms of pressure, like phone calls, emails, town hall appearances, and media coverage, petitions become a powerful piece of the puzzle. I know people say this all the time and it feels cliché, but voting matters. It really matters. Because the people who get elected are the people who write the laws. And if you don't vote, someone else is making that decision for you. In many local elections, the winning margin is just a few hundred votes, sometimes less. A city council member might win by 50 votes. A state representative might win by 200. Your vote could literally be the difference between someone who fights for your interests and someone who doesn't. And don't just vote in presidential elections. Vote in the midterms, vote in primaries, vote in local elections. Because the person who decides whether your city builds a new park or a new parking lot is the city council member. The person who decides how your schools are funded is the state legislator. These are the elections that shape your daily life the most, and they're the elections with the lowest turnout, which means your vote counts even more. If you really want to understand why certain laws get passed, follow the money. Campaign donations are public record. You can look up who is donating to your representatives. Websites like opensecrets.org track every dollar. When you see that your senator received $500,000 from the pharmaceutical industry and then voted against lowering drug prices, that's not a coincidence. When a congressman gets massive donations from the oil industry and then votes against climate regulations, connect the dots. The information is there. It's public. You just have to look. Understanding the money behind lawmaking doesn't make you cynical. It makes you informed. And informed citizens make better decisions about who to vote for, which causes to support, and where to focus their advocacy energy. Knowledge of the financial landscape is just as important as knowledge of the legislative process itself. They're two sides of the same coin. The media plays a bigger role in lawmaking than most people realize. When a news story goes viral, lawmakers respond. Public pressure builds, and suddenly, a bill that was stuck in committee for months gets moved to the front of the line. Think about how body camera footage of police misconduct led to waves of police reform legislation across the country, or how investigative journalism exposing financial fraud led to new banking regulations, or how a viral video of environmental destruction pushed lawmakers to act on conservation bills they'd been ignoring for years. Media attention creates urgency. This is why freedom of the press is so important. Journalists shine a light on problems that lawmakers might prefer to ignore. And in the age of social media, ordinary citizens can create that media attention themselves. A well-timed video, a powerful story, a compelling thread on social media, these things can generate the kind of pressure that moves legislation. You don't need to own a newspaper. You just need a phone and a story worth telling. Not all laws last forever. Some get repealed. This means they're officially removed from the books, and the reasons vary. Sometimes society's values change, like when prohibition was repealed in the United States after people decided banning alcohol was causing more problems than it solved. Sometimes a law is struck down by the courts because it violates the Constitution. And sometimes a new law is passed that replaces the old one. The old law doesn't technically get repealed in a dramatic ceremony, it just gets superseded, overwritten, like saving a new file over an old one. Understanding that laws can be undone is just as important as understanding how they're made, because it means no law is permanent, no mistake is forever. If a bad law gets passed, the system provides tools to fix it. It might take time, it might take effort, but the possibility is always there. And that is what keeps the system from becoming truly tyrannical. Some laws have a built-in expiration date. It's called a sunset clause. When a law has a sunset clause, it automatically expires after a certain number of years unless Congress votes to renew it. Why would lawmakers do this? Because sometimes they're not sure if a law will work. So they say, let's try this for 5 years. If it works, we'll renew it. If it doesn't, it just disappears. It's like a test drive for legislation. Smart, right? Some of the most important laws in American history have had sunset clauses. Parts of the Patriot Act, passed after September 11th to expand surveillance powers, had sunset clauses that required Congress to debate and renew them repeatedly. This forced lawmakers to re-examine whether those expanded powers were still necessary or whether they had gone too far. Sunset clauses are one of the best tools for keeping laws accountable over time. Here's something that every law student learns. Every law has unintended consequences. You pass a rule to fix one problem, and it creates 3 new ones. This is not theory. This happens all the time. A law requiring every building to have a fire escape seemed like pure common sense, but the added construction cost made housing more expensive, which pushed low-income families out of certain neighborhoods. The intention was safety. The result included displacement. Nobody planned for that, but it happened. This is why the legislative process is supposed to be slow and careful. Every hearing, every committee debate, every amendment is a chance to catch these unintended consequences before a law goes into effect. Does the system catch all of them? No. But it catches more than if one person just made a decision by themselves. And when unintended consequences do appear, the system allows for the law to be amended, refined, or repealed. The process continues even after the law is signed. Making a law is one thing. Enforcing it is another thing entirely. And the uncomfortable truth is, laws are not enforced equally. Studies have repeatedly shown that factors like race, income, and geography affect how laws are applied. The same drug possession charge might result in probation for one person and years in prison for another, depending on where they live, what they look like, and whether they can afford a good lawyer. The law on paper might be identical, but the experience of that law can be radically different depending on who you are. This is one of the biggest challenges in any legal system. Writing fair laws is hard enough, but making sure those laws are applied fairly, that's even harder. And it's an ongoing struggle in every country in the world. The law is only as good as its enforcement, and enforcement is carried out by human beings, with all their biases, pressures, and imperfections. We're living in a time where technology is changing everything about how laws are made. Online platforms make it easier than ever to track legislation, contact representatives, organize campaigns, and spread awareness. What used to require weeks of letter writing now happens in minutes. Some governments are even experimenting with digital democracy. Estonia, for example, allows citizens to vote online in national elections. Other countries are exploring using blockchain technology to make government records more transparent and tamper-proof. And artificial intelligence is starting to play a role too. AI tools can now analyze thousands of pages of legal text in seconds, identify conflicts between new and existing laws, and even predict how courts might rule on certain issues. The tools are evolving fast, and they have the potential to make lawmaking more efficient, more transparent, and more accessible to ordinary citizens. The future of law is digital, and that future is already here. If there's one thing I want you to take from this video, it's that grassroots movements work. History proves it. Every major legal change in human history started with a group of ordinary people who decided they'd had enough. The abolition of slavery didn't start in Congress. It started with activists who organized, marched, wrote, and spoke until the moral weight of their argument became undeniable. Women's suffrage didn't start with a law. It started with women who chained themselves to fences, went on hunger strikes, and refused to be ignored. The civil rights movement, the labor movement, marriage equality, all of them started at the grassroots. And grassroots movements are more powerful today than ever before. Social media gives you a megaphone. The internet gives you organization tools. Crowdfunding gives you resources. The barriers to creating a movement are lower than they have ever been in human history. All you need is something worth fighting for, and the courage to start. There's an old saying, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Meaning, even if you didn't know something was illegal, you can still be punished for it. The law doesn't care whether you read it or not. It applies to you regardless. And that is exactly why understanding the law is so important. Not just to avoid punishment, but to protect yourself, to know your rights, to recognize when those rights are being violated, and to know what to do about it when they are. Understanding how laws are made gives you something even more valuable. It gives you the ability to participate in the process, to be more than just a person who follows rules someone else made, to be a person who shapes those rules, who influences them, who holds the rule makers accountable. That's not just knowledge. That is freedom. Knowledge that stays in one head doesn't change the world, but knowledge that spreads, that's unstoppable. So here's my challenge to you. Teach someone else what you learned today. Share this video. Have a conversation about it. Bring it up at the dinner table. The more people who understand how laws are made, the harder it becomes for anyone to abuse the system. When citizens are informed, politicians are more careful. When voters understand the process, they make better choices about who to elect. When young people learn this early, they grow up as more engaged, more responsible members of society. Education is the foundation of democracy. It always has been. And in a world where misinformation spreads fast and trust in institutions is low, accurate knowledge about how government works is more valuable than gold. So don't just keep what you learned today. Pass it on. That's how real change happens. At the end of the day, the most important function of any law is to protect the people who cannot protect themselves. Children who can't fight back against abusive parents. Workers who can't stand up to powerful employers alone. Communities that can't fight pollution from billion-dollar corporations without legal backing. That is what law is supposed to do. Remember what Hammurabi wrote over 3,700 years ago? He wanted to make justice visible in the land, that the strong might not injure the weak. Thousands of years later, that's still the goal. We haven't achieved it perfectly. No society has. But the pursuit of that goal is what drives every good law ever written. And when you participate in the lawmaking process, whether by voting, petitioning, contacting your representatives, or running for office yourself, you become part of that ancient pursuit. You join a tradition that stretches back to the earliest human civilizations. You become a guardian of justice. And that is something to be proud of. All right, let's make this practical. Here are your action steps. Do these this week. 1. Look up who your elected representatives are, federal and local. Write down their names and contact information. 2. Pick one issue you care about, just one, and find out what bills are currently in the system that address it. Use congress.gov or your state's legislative website. 3. Make one phone call. Call your representative's office and tell them where you stand on that issue. It takes 5 minutes, and it matters more than you think. 4. Register to vote if you haven't already. And if you are registered, check that your registration is current. 5. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how laws work, because the more people who know, the stronger our democracy becomes. These aren't hard steps, they're simple. But they're the kind of simple steps that, when millions of people take them, change everything. The system is not perfect. We've established that. Money has too much influence. The process is slow. Politicians don't always listen. But here's what I know for certain. The system gets worse when good people check out. And it gets better when good people show up. Every law that protects your rights was passed because someone showed up. Every injustice that was corrected happened because someone refused to stay silent. Every improvement in your daily life that came through legislation happened because ordinary people engaged with an imperfect system and made it work. So don't wait for the system to be perfect before you participate. Participate and make it better. That's not idealism, that's reality. The people who show up are the people who shape the rules, and the rules shape everything else. Be one of the people who shows up, starting today. Let me leave you with this. Laws are not made by buildings. They're not made by documents. They're not made by institutions. Laws are made by people, human beings, with flaws, with agendas, with biases, but also with the capacity for good, for justice, for fairness, for compassion. And because laws are made by people, they can be changed by people, by you. The entire system, from the ancient code of Ur-Nammu carved into clay tablets 4,000 years ago to the digital legislation tracking tools of today, exists because human beings decided that rules matter, that justice matters, that protecting each other matters. You are part of this story now. You understand how the system works. You know where the power lies. You know where the weaknesses are. And you know what you can do about it. So go out there, get involved, make your voice heard. Because the next great law, the one that changes everything, might just start with your idea. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.